Hello, folks, and thanks for listening into the podcast. I'm excited about today's interview. I was recently introduced to Nina Barnett by a friend and have really been blown away by the conversations that we've had. She's a female founder, she's a young founder, and she's got a really exciting product. So I think all around this is going to be a good one. You'll hear her story and you'll definitely understand why I'm so excited. She's the CEO of Grooop, a really cool app that we will talk all about today. Nina, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to speak to me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great. So can you explain for the listeners what Grooop is?
Yeah, of course. So Grooop is an app, and right now it's just an iOS app, but it is an app that aims to create a fun and intuitive and non-invasive way for women on college campuses and in cities, really in all situations, just to stay safe. So our mission is just to create a positive conversation surrounding safety, but obviously the biggest part of our brand is the app.
That's great. And so how did you come up with this app? I take it from the use case and everything that there must have been some personal component to it that drove you to want to create this application.
Yeah, of course. So I actually had the idea when I was a senior in high school because I was kind of like the mom of my friend group and honestly just wanted an easier way to keep track of my friends and, something that was appealing and sort of put it, aside, brushed it under the rug a little bit, and then went to college and realized that everyone in college kind of thinks that they're invincible, including myself when I was in college. And actually had a friend held at gunpoint my freshman year, a block away from our dorm, and, found out that I had friends that were sexually assaulted, and I didn't think they were doing anything out of the ordinary. There was nothing that I thought they deserved anything like that. So
Well, yeah,
I kind of,
they never would. But I also like to point out you're UNC Chapel Hill grad, right? So not
yeah,
exactly a dangerous school or
no,
city. Yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, people think of Chapel Hill as the amazing city that it is. And I, was lucky enough that I didn't feel unsafe most of the time. And I was never in a personal situation. But because I had close friends like that, and like I said, I was like the mom of my friends, I feel like I always will be. I just was like, something needs to be done, and sort of waited for someone to invent something that would be appealing to an 18-year-old. And there just really wasn't anything out there. I mean, there's tons of different resources that the university offers, obviously, and UNC was great about educating us with that, but there was nothing that, tied safety to also having fun. Which I think is kind of the biggest discrepancy right now, is that everything attached to safety is attached with the worst case scenario and with tragedies and things like that. So I wanted to flip the conversation a little bit and figured I was the best person to do it.
That's awesome. So maybe talk a little bit to how the application works. Because when I think of it, of safety, I think one thing somebody could do is I could turn on share my location with somebody,
Mhm.
but that seems like just kind of a little skeevy to me and a little bit of an invasion of privacy perhaps, and probably not scalable across a group, which ostensibly with a name like Grooop, it's more than one-to-one.
Yeah, absolutely. So what the app actually does when you log in, obviously we have it as a free app right now for all the users. So we monetize it on a larger scale, but with individual users, it's totally free because we don't think you should ever have to pay for safety. And when a user logs in, they go in and they set safe zones. And safe zones can be anything from where someone lives to a friend's house to where you work. If you're a college student, it might be the library, or it could even be a bar or restaurant that you go to regularly. And any of these places are just places you feel comfortable, places that you're familiar with. So if you were in one of those places, no one would be concerned.
Mhm.
And whenever a user walks in or out of one of those zones, it'll say that they're good or out and about. So again, it's not saying I'm extremely safe or extremely unsafe, but it's changing that status and doing it automatically so a user never has to take their phone out of their pocket.
That's great, because so often when I'm with a friend and they're leaving to go somewhere, I'll say, text me when you get home. But this kind of takes out that even need to do that. I could just log in and see their status right away, I take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are totally automatic. And, one of our thoughts behind that was there's so many times when people will forget to send that text and say I'm home, or, someone they'll get home and their phone might die or whatever it might be, and they'll just be getting ready for bed. Or in a lot of cases, if there's a time difference and someone's traveling, things like that, this sort of eliminates the need to have to do a bunch of steps. It really just gives and offers that peace of mind to the user that's updating their status, but also the users on the other end that are looking for that. But yeah, so those are totally automatic, but then users can also go in and say when they're ready to go, which sends out a push notification, and they can send out alerts. And ready to go can literally mean anything someone wants. It could be ready to go get food. It can be ready to, stop talking to someone, whatever someone wants. We want the ready to go button to make the app an everyday app. We want it to be something that, encourages people to use it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just in a dark alley at 3 a.m.
Sure. So do you think users are using that ready to go for non-security related things?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of times people use the ready to go to kind of just check in, but also a lot of times that we've heard from users is they'll say, we use the ready to go button at the end of the night, or, if they're traveling, we have a lot of consultants and people like that are traveling a lot with coworkers that use the app. And they've said, that's when we use it when we're leaving a client site and things like that, to see if maybe there's someone else leaving at the same time. Because you get that push notification and see that someone's ready to go. So that kind of, allows it to be something that I'm not in a horrible situation, but it'd be nice if I had somebody else there.
Mm-hmm.
So that keeps it pretty every day. And then obviously the alert button is the safety aspect of it, and that will pinpoint your exact location and send it out to all of your active groups, because you can make groups inactive, especially if it's like family or someone that you're not always with and you don't need their groups to be active. But the alert is the only time that it's going to pinpoint that location. So obviously that is when you would want it to pinpoint your location, but we kind of made it so that that's the only time it seems like it's invasive, quote unquote, because we have heard from so many people, especially college students, which was our very original target market, that they don't want someone tracking them all the time. And, especially when someone steps into a college town and has all these new friends that they don't really know that well, you don't want to share that location. And especially, people that are using it with coworkers, they don't want their boss seeing their location, things like that. But it gives people that extra layer of protection, and gives them the peace of mind to know that their location is shared if something bad's happening. So those are the main functions, but the nice thing is you can do everything from your lock screen, which is definitely my favorite part. And I think probably the highest use case, because then you can set off alerts in less than 2 seconds. You can say you're ready to go in less than 2 seconds, whatever it might be that doesn't draw attention to your phone or what you're doing. So that's definitely the highest use case we see is with the lock screen widget.
Now, when you do that, when you do that alert and it gives them the location, do you attach any context to that so that they know, or is the expectation that that person should follow up and call you, or should they call the police, or how do you think about that button being used? And can you maybe speak to some of some sample use cases of where somebody might want to use that button?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially we did a lot of research on whether we should, attach an SOS sending to the police or whatever it might be, even if it was to a campus police, if we should put that in the software. And what we actually found, especially because this app is really directed towards women, is that most women don't want to think it's the worst case scenario, or they're starting to second guess themselves and they think, what if I'm wrong? And if I'm wrong, then, the police might be mad or whatever it might be. And so we really wanted to challenge the user to trust their intuition and to feel like we're empowering them to trust their intuition. And so we have allowed them to do that by, bypassing the police, but going straight to the groups. And so when a user sets off an alert to all of their active groups, it'll say, for example, if I set off one, it would say, Nina set off an alert, show my location, it'll say call or text. And that way the friends or the family or the coworkers have the option to call or text, and then it's up to them. So, if someone wasn't answering through a call or wasn't responding to a text, it's kind of up to them and puts the responsibility back to them. And that's why our tagline is safer together, because we think that this, allows users to be thinking about safety, but not automatically escalating it to it is the worst case scenario, rather that when someone's uncomfortable, they can set off that alert and they don't have to worry about being wrong.
Yep.
So some of the use cases
maybe be like, there's a creepy guy at the bar, like,
yeah,
he keeps looking at me, or, and maybe somebody you want them to come by and visit, or maybe just, hey, call me so that I can get, or it's like a creepy guy's talking to me, call me so I can get away from him.
Yeah. So kind of how we've seen it, obviously there's a grand scale of how we see alerts, but what we've seen the most is that, if it's someone creepy talking at the bar, something like that, that might be more of a ready to go button because, it looks casual. You're not like, I'm in immediate danger, but please get me out of this situation type of scenario. But we have seen, I actually had a good friend who I was in a group with while I was in college that set off an alert when she was walking home from the library. It was like not super late, and she just kind of felt uncomfortable with someone walking behind her, but didn't want to start talking on the phone or call the police. She just felt like that was a little bit extreme and set off an alert. And we happened to be close by, a couple of us, and walked home with her. And not 5 minutes later, there was an alert set out through Alert Carolina, which is their alert system, saying that there was actually an armed person on campus right where she was. And so, it was one of those things where thank goodness she trusted her gut and did that. But she had said, I had asked, well, why didn't you call the police if you were that worried? And she was like, well, I honestly it just looked like a student. I would have never thought that that's what it was. And so, you kind of see two extremes, but what we kind of say is, if you're uncomfortable and you would call one of your friends, or you would want to call your parents, or whatever it might be, especially for college students, go ahead and set off that alert. Like, this isn't the, oh my gosh, don't cry wolf. This is the, if you're going to cry wolf, you would cry wolf to your friends and your family and your coworkers. And so this kind of, again, empowers the user to be able to do that and not worry about being wrong, because those people don't judge them.
That's great. That's great. So, so you mentioned this came out of a need that you felt. How did you go about building the app? Do you come from a programming background yourself?
So I wish. I actually in college majored in acting and physics with a math minor. So I was like truly scaling all of the different areas.
Everything but programming.
Yeah. And so originally I started with a computer programming minor, but I was too far into this more of the sciencey side and data collection. And so just decided I would sort of do that later, and originally really wanted to program it myself, but kind of had to put that aside and say, this is something that people need right now, and I need to put pride aside and work together with somebody else. So I actually interviewed, I don't even know how many different developers, freelancers, different development companies. Truly spent an entire summer interviewing people.
That's fascinating, because this is one of the number one questions that I get asked, because I'm a pretty technical guy. I've developed quite a bit of code, and people are always asking me, how do I find a technical co-founder, or how do I find somebody to build an app? And a lot of people that aren't technical or from a project management background don't even know where to get started. So how do you even formulate the questions that you want to ask them? I guess the first couple interviews, you're figuring out which questions to even ask, maybe?
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to a friend that wants to start an app, which seems to be a common thing these days. But I was talking to a friend recently and kind of recalling some of my earlier conversations with people. And, the first couple conversations, I was just like, I don't know how much I should even share about my idea. Is this going to be stolen immediately? Should I have a lawyer, but I can't afford a lawyer? all these different conversations.
That's funny. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, that's funny.
And originally I think I Googled and was like, how to build an app if I can't code. And I was like, okay, let's see, went through the clickbait, all of it. And then ended up, and I think this is definitely the way to do it, would have saved me a lot of time, just reached out to family, friends, and people that I knew that were in technical fields or worked with mobile apps. And most of them were not remotely in my sector. They were, fitness, or they were, lifestyle, just things that wouldn't have really fit in. And so they were like super willing to help and really excited to recommend people they had heard of and things like that. And essentially what it came down to, we partnered with a company called Smashing Boxes, and they're out of Durham, and we're still partnered with them. And I work with their CEO as like one of our advisors. So we work pretty closely with them.
Great. I'll link
But
to them in the show notes, by the way. Thank you.
yeah, they're great. And Nick Jordan is who I work with, and he's awesome. And actually went to Carolina at one point, but
You're lucky I didn't wear my Duke shirt. I was going to wear it. It'd be a smart ass.
I know I have my UNC hat. I was wearing it, and then I switched it out for the company that I climbed Kilimanjaro with, but who I also love. But I basically just kind of, it ended up when I sat in the meeting with Smashing Boxes. First of all, the engineer who sat in on that was, sketching ideas and was just so pumped about the idea and was like, this is something that needs to be done. And it also came down to, and I think this should come down to on really any business partnership, I could tell that they had morals that aligned with me. And, we had connections outside of, the business world that were in things like ministry or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And that, just knowing that they were kind of grounded in the same type of morality and also believed in the idea and wanted the idea to succeed, not just wanted to make money, is what it came down to and why we ended up choosing them.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I agree. If you can get alignment on other things outside of just their pure capabilities, that helps so much. Mm-hmm. That's great that you were able to find a partner like that. So obviously you're really young still, but even younger back then. Outside of the tech, you mentioned being able to reach out to people in tech, maybe in other industries, but they know a little bit there and can get you pointed in the right direction. What other type of support network did you have to help you get this thing going?
Yeah, so I was so lucky to have two amazing parents that are really supportive of this kind of thing. My dad's in commercial real estate, but is very much so, runs his small firm. And then my mom's an artist. And so she has done anything and everything visually. And I mean, it's just the most amazing woman ever. Sorry, she just totally outshined my dad in that. But I think having them two, but then also I think just the environment I was surrounded by at UNC as well really helped with that. I had already started my company when I got plugged into a program called the Adams Apprenticeship, and you have to apply for it. And it's 30 students, 15 grad and 15 undergrad from any discipline. So obviously you have a ton of business and business school, whether that's undergraduate or graduate, but then there were people in the pharmacy school, there were people, journalists, all over the place. Obviously my majors were very weird, but their whole mantra is to help people avoid the years of trying to figure it out, trying to get into entrepreneurship and helping jumpstart that entrepreneurial career. And having that support group, and I'm still really, really close with a bunch of the people from my cohort and some of the advisors that I had in that.
How many companies were in that cohort? You might have mentioned.
So there's 30 of us, mm-hmm. and I would say probably 75% of them either already had a company or were about to start it. But the whole, gist behind it was that people had an entrepreneurial spirit if they didn't already have a company. But
so there were 30 companies in it when you at the same time that you were. It wasn't that there's been 30 since inception.
Yeah, so that was just my cohort. So, and then we do the interviewing of the next cohort, and they are even more impressive. So, and one of my best friends just at UNC, who was a grade below me, she ended up in the cohort below, and I was just blown away by them. And so I think
that's usually how those things work. There's a bunch of different, they don't call them incubators, accelerators or whatever, mm-hmm. that are industry specific in Charlotte. And you see it by the 7th or 8th generation, you can't even recognize the companies compared to the ones in the first generation.
Yeah, it was really cool. And it's interesting because I've also been a part of a couple incubators, and I'm in a really awesome one right now, which I'll speak on in 2 seconds. But basically the cool thing about Adams Apprenticeship is it wasn't just, my company, it was also my entrepreneurial spirit in general. And, we did things like we were out in California and talked with some of the older cohorts there, and, also had a New York trip where we talked with some of the people that were there. And you also have an access to like 200 plus mentors, one of which happened to be Nick at Smashing Boxes, which was so funny because I didn't know he was a part of it, and he wrote my recommendation letter, which was probably cheating. But I think just having those people and just being able to bounce ideas off of them and, you know, share resources. Like, for example, there's a guy that I think is a genius, and his name's Ben Koken, and he had started an influencer marketing company and still runs it. It's called Greensleeve. And I now have all these female founders that are always looking for influencers and things like that. And, you know, especially because he is a small business as well, I always say, well, you know, I have someone that's got partnerships with Reebok and all these things, and he's doing great things. And he just happened to be also 23, 22 and starting his company, and just through this program. So it was really, really cool. I thought that was great.
That is great. So, some of those programs are questionable, but the ones where you really make meaningful long-term connections. And the interesting thing will be 5-10 years from now, when each of you is on to the next big thing, or you've scaled it in a major way, and seeing how those relationships continue to build and grow.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, the one I'm a part of now, it's through Vital Voices, which is a really, really amazing nonprofit organization that helps basically women all over the world that are doing incredible things. And they're a huge organization, but they started this new leadership incubator for, again, like 30 women. And it's all women that either have nonprofits or social impact driven companies. And seeing their work, especially during this time and during quarantine and things like that, and seeing what they're doing has been so inspiring. And I mean, we have a group chat that, I'm not kidding, probably has 100 messages a day, and they're all extremely helpful messages, which is crazy. And, you know, that whole cohort, and just having all of them to bounce ideas off of, especially as other women, is really amazing.
So I'd asked about the support network when you were getting started, and it sounds like you've covered the bases on how that has evolved. Has it evolved further even beyond that as you've been going, or is that kind of the support network?
Yeah.
Vital Voices, the Greensleeve, Adams Apprenticeship.
Yeah. So obviously, yeah. So Ben and I keep in touch, in his company Greensleeve. Yeah. So he's great. And just like having them also as friends, but I think also Vital Voices has been incredible. I did an accelerator with New Chip, which was great. And that was totally virtual. And I still, I actually just interviewed my advisor from that.
What's it
and
called? New Chip?
New Chip, they're newer, ironically. But, and they're out of Austin, Texas, but they do it virtual, and it's pretty cool. And they really help you with funding.
Okay.
And that's kind of the point of their accelerator. But I was super, super lucky to get accepted into the Female Founder Collective last January, so January 2019. And I would say that movement and that group of women, and I mean, it's thousands of them now, but that has been so beneficial. And there's things like Female Founder Collective, and Girl Boss is a whole nother thing. And, you know, I went to the Girl Boss conference last year and became great friends with a girl that's starting this amazing travel company. And, you know, she and I got coffee in New York when she was in New York, and she's someone that we both bounce ideas off of and things like that. But the Female Founder Collective is, I think, doing the best. And I mean, I just couldn't thank them enough, but also just think it's incredible that, you know, Rebecca Minkoff was one of the founders of it. And, you know, I was having drinks with her during a workshop, and just being able to say that she was like super willing to listen, and that going to a full day workshop was extremely helpful, is not what you can say about a lot of conferences and things like that. So I think that, I don't know, it's something that I think women especially they work so well together. And I think, unfortunately, it's taking, you know, a bazillion years to finally figure out that this is how we're the strongest, is when we're together and not working against each other. But I think that things like Girl Boss and Female Founder Collective are doing amazing things and have helped my company immensely.
No, that's great to hear. I recently had Linda Nash from Welcome MD. It's her fourth company. She's had 3 exits, very, very successful female serial entrepreneur. And she talked a lot about the lack of mentorship in the early going, and that all of her mentors were men. And while she was very appreciative and they brought something to bear, it's just not the same as
Yeah.
having those female mentors. So it's great to hear, and she's more my age. It's great to hear that your generation has access to things that she certainly didn't back then. Not to say that we're doing enough yet, but it is great to hear that there is progress there. I'm curious, was there a single aha moment when you knew you were going for it? I know this was an idea. It kept nagging at you after high school, and then you had a couple of friends that had some violent crimes enacted on them. Was there one single moment there where you were like, okay, I've got this?
So I don't know if I ever was like, man, I've done it now, but,
I mean more like that you're going to do it. I
yes. Yeah, I was like, that's an everyday struggle, but actually, yes. So I'll give him credit. One of my best guy friends, he's like a brother to me. His name's McLean, and he knew about the idea. He was one of the few people I told. And he had said it was a great idea. I knew him in high school. We went to college together. And he actually texted me a link to an article in December of 2015. And it was a link to an article, and it said like the top 10 grossing apps in the App Store right now. And like half of them were safety apps. And I thought that is really frustrating, mostly because I hadn't even heard of them, and they were just going to be doing this. And since then, those apps have unfortunately failed. And he sent it, and he said, "I don't know why you haven't started the company yet." And it's a kind of a classic thing that he would say, just being a good friend. But at the same time, just seeing that link and seeing that those companies that still weren't doing what we needed to be doing were doing really well, I was like, okay, I need to do this. And so I started literally like drawing pictures of what I thought the screens should look like and things like that. And, trying to come up with exactly every single feature that I wanted it to be, and sitting down and having meetings with my dad's friends that were in technology. And, most people are pretty willing to help college students. So that was something that I literally had a sketchbook and I cannot draw. So that was interesting. But yeah, that was probably the aha moment.
Does he know that was your aha moment? Or?
I don't think he does, honestly, which is kind of funny. I should probably tell him.
Just a suggestion. So what did funding look like along the way? Have you raised money or?
Yeah. So we decided to do family friends in the beginning, especially because this mission of the company is so near and dear to my heart, but also I think can get skewed really easily. And we really wanted to be able to say, like, this is the direction this company is going. And especially because we didn't want to start putting ads in the app. And we knew that was something that was an easy way of revenue and things like that. So we didn't want to have kind of that looming investor, and investors are great. And I don't know why I was so afraid of them in the beginning, but I think that originally, that was,
investors are great.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that, just really focusing on the mission, we decided to do family and friends, and luckily no one's really not passionate about safety. So that went well. And then we ended up, this fall, we were going to try and stay self-funded, but just due to, especially now with quarantine and everything, we really decided that, this is something that we want to open up. So even though we've kind of already done a round, we're doing more of a pre-seed round, which was supposed to start and close this spring, but we've pushed back till the fall just due to the fact that no one's leaving their houses right now. So
Sure. No, that's interesting. That is in some ways unfortunate timing, but it may also be that people decide to go out in droves once they come back, and
yeah, exactly.
much more important. So nothing about developing an app, but you develop an app. I didn't hear anything about a major in finance, so I'm guessing you knew nothing about raising funds. How do you go about putting a friends and family round together?
So I basically told my dad, I begged him, and I was like, will you be the president of the company and help me figure this out, please? And because he knows about that kind of thing. He had to get a background with finance, and he also has a psych major, which is helpful. But so we decided just to go kind of with that. But in terms of selling and pitching and all of that, is kind of where my acting major came in handy, because even though I wasn't putting on a show, it made it very, very easy. Like, I don't have any trouble talking about money, which I think is a major thing that women need to work on. But I don't have an issue talking about money. I don't have an issue saying that I was at the time 17 raising money, and just being able to just pitch and present with passion and belief in my company was kind of what we've relied on. And then now going into this pre-seed round, we've had New Chip, which has prepped us, and, Vital Voices and these other companies that have really set it up for how it kind of works. And having some friends that went through funding too, that sort of helped. But I mean, I was literally like Googling, how much money am I supposed to be raising? Because in my mind, I was like, do I raise $1,000? Which was hilarious. But it was very much so a lot of Googling, a lot of reading, a lot of talking to other entrepreneurs. And, early on, I truly just text a bunch of my guy friends that now work as investment bankers and would just say, hey, can you give me some price points for some companies that have IPO'd and things like that? I'm just trying to get a grasp, and just reading, different safety companies, all of their term sheets and things like that were being presented, or whether it was, their ginormous document right before they IPO'd that was now available online. I would literally just read really boring documents to figure out what I was supposed to be doing.
That's great. No, and that's a hard one for a lot of people. And even people who have a technical background struggle with that, because raising money is a different animal. And frankly, raising money, friends and family, still requires some knowledge of it. Different knowledge to raise an angel round, different knowledge to raise a VC round, and then very different for private equity. But a lot of the concepts, I think, are the same. And I think using the tools that are out there, Investopedia is one that I still go to, and I've raised money 7 or 8 times at this point.
Yeah, I love Investopedia. I actually, while it was still, the app had launched, the company had launched, I had probably the best internship ever at a company called Carbon out in Redwood City, and they're a 3D printing company. And I truly think they're the coolest company in the world. It was the most amazing place to work. And
Redwood City is awesome because you're right there at Menlo Park. And
it was great. And actually Ben Koken worked there too, which is so funny. But I worked out there, and I was a financial planning and analysis intern, which was kind of funny because I didn't know anything about FP&A. So I did a lot of Googling then. But it was something that, because I had done this stuff with my company, I figured out what to do with them. And, them just being an incredible and amazing company. I mean, I sat down with the CEO, Jody Simone, and literally asked him about his process and figured that was okay. I hope it was. He seemed cool with it, and talked with I interviewed almost every single, head of division, and just was like, hey, what was this like? Because you were on this company when it was 5 people and now it's 500 people and things like that. And I think that helped a ton. It was probably a little risky, but oh well.
No, I mean, I think what you're doing is exactly right. And I tell people that just ask questions. All people can say is no. They're not going to throw you in jail for asking questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And most people want to help out. I mean, there's somebody that helped them out and they need to pay it forward themselves. So I'm glad to hear that. And I would encourage any of the listeners who are thinking about starting their own company, to do the same thing, because everybody has access to these resources that you're talking about.
Exactly. It's all free.
So what are your plans for growth? I believe you told me, and when we spoke last week, that you're in 5 universities. Do you go for more schools? Do you go into new markets, new products, new use cases? What does growth look like in your mind over the next few years? Once we go back to whatever normal becomes.
Whenever that is. I'm usually in New York City, so it might be a while. But so the way that we originally planned it is we were like, we're going to spend 2 years growing the user base. That's what we're going to do. We're going to lose a lot of money and we're just going to do it. And so we did that. Great, successful. And then at the end of that, we said, okay, and then we're going to have to really focus on the revenue model, because otherwise it's just going to crash and burn. So how we basically price it out is we offer subscription-based models to universities, to employers, to, kind of anyone that would be interested. But we offer things like, tracking of the alert analytics, but not ever showing who the user is, that kind of thing. It's more of like time and place, so that people can improve their safety. We offer the marketing on our end so that it seems more like it's a peer-driven app rather than something coming top down, especially when it's employers. And then also we offer things like Apple Watch integration, stuff like that, that also keeps this app free for the users. But so obviously the most, kind of market would be universities. And so that was who we originally targeted. And that's who we're still trying our best to just merge into, because kind of what we run into is that obviously a lot of universities have a million different safety practices and they have other apps that they're using. But what we find is that a lot of these apps that they're investing millions of dollars in, most of the students have never heard of them. And when they have heard of those apps, they don't use them because it's something the university is saying, here, please use this. We're putting this on our whatever it is brochure for the school. And so we want to say, hey, we love those apps. We want people to be safe. Please use them. But also for the 90% of students that don't want to use that because they don't think safety is relevant to them, we want to give them an app that teaches them about safety and how safety can be used every day. And so that's kind of our approach with universities, but obviously it can just be hard to get in the door. So we sort of started expanding to looking at things like, I have a friend that's a consultant and she said, I go to client sites, 10 states away, and the only person that knows where I am or anything around me is my employer, but I'm not going to say, hey, here's my location. So why don't I just have my employer use Grooop with me? And so this is something that we kind of started looking at, big consulting firms. And that's sort of the market we're looking at right now, is that we can offer employers the opportunity to be able to say, hey, this is how we're keeping women safe, especially, but all of our employees safe without invading their privacy, which I think is a really hard line for a lot of employers because they don't want to invade privacy. Everything going on, in the past couple of years, they want to make sure that they're respecting people, but they also want to be able to say that they're keeping people safe. So this is something that we realized, is something that could be used, especially for people that have traveling jobs.
Well, I think especially conferences, because in conferences, there's places you go that you're planning to go, and then there's other places, and there's a lot of drinking going on, and a lot of people that you don't know that you're interacting with pretty regularly. And there's probably a bunch of other use cases for that. So corporate America has been pretty responsive to this in addition to the universities.
Yeah, so it's definitely newer with corporate America, but it's something that we're really hoping catches on, because I think it's something that women especially are finally being hired more, which is so incredible, but also women still want to feel safe. And I think that that's something that's overlooked kind of easily. And so this allows, whether it's a male or a woman employer, this allows the employer to say like, hey, this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so corporate America is definitely kind of our main target right now, especially while universities are figuring out virtual school and everything like that. But I think, so corporate America is something that we're really focusing on, but it's something that we have thought of in a million different markets, but probably the only other one that we're really planning out. I mean, there's so many different, you could go retirement homes, you can go hospitals, everyone needs safety. But the other market that we're really, I guess, putting on the short list is the travel market, because so many people go with companies like Beyond, and I went by myself with this company, and I'm so grateful. They were great. But, people go by themselves or with one friend, or they're studying abroad, or they're going with these companies where they don't really know the group they're with super well, but they still don't want to show that they feel unsafe around those people. So it's kind of one of those, it alleviates the, hey, track me all the time, mm-hmm. but it allows them to have that extra layer of, okay, at least I know that in a bad case of whatever it is, I feel safer when I'm traveling. So definitely like travel companies, travel agents, things like that is a market that we're definitely trying to tap into.
Awesome. So I want to shift gears a bit now and talk about women in technology. There are not a lot of women founders who scale businesses, especially tech businesses. Why do you think that is?
Well, statistically, there's like zero funding for women, which is really frustrating. And I actually have a great friend through the Vital Voices community, and she was so angry recently and said, I just cannot believe this, how little funding there is for female entrepreneurs. And even though there's more now, it is like staggeringly low. And
yeah, I'm going to repost. Linda, who I mentioned, had sent me a study and we posted it in her show notes. I'm going to repost it.
yeah,
They did a study of VC funding for women, and it actually, I don't know if this is where you're going, but in this study, they found the investors were 85% more likely to ask women operational questions than they asked men strategic questions. And when you start from there, you're much less likely to give funding. It's just a fact that if I'm getting into operational questions, I'm going to trip you up on something that you don't know yet. Whereas if all I'm asking you is vision and strategy, it's much easier to raise money.
Exactly.
I will link out to that study though.
Yeah, please do. I think that it's something that, it is, I think being a woman that also was a STEM major, and that was honestly not a positive experience for me. And I'm a very strong-willed individual. Like, I will do something if you think that I can't. So that's something that I love about my personality. But I also know that not all women are like that. And there are women with amazing ideas. And I think that, think of the amount of men that are kind of shy or awkward or whatever it might be that have created these amazing companies. And, because maybe one or two people said something discouraging, but not near as much discouragement goes towards women. And I don't think it's necessarily just from men. I think it's, from all areas. But I think the hardest thing is that, I don't know the name of it. There's some type of the name for the model that this goes under, but basically, men say, well, I looked at women, female and male candidates, and like the male was just the better one. And and I totally understand that. I get that. Like, if that might be a better candidate, great. But the problem is that's what everyone is saying. And so I think that because of that, then it ends up being like, okay, well, why would I even try? Well, why would I even bother? And so I think there's just like, there's all this really great, there's female marches and there's this great positivity, and there's so many males that are super supportive. And I am so grateful to all of them. I have some of my biggest fans and friends are guys, and I am so thankful for that. But I think the problem is then when you get down on paper and you say, okay, there's no funding at all, and there's, if someone's just Googling it's really depressing. Like, I wouldn't want to start a company if I was just Googling how, and, it's little things like I've been in accelerators and they said, hey, here's a suggested reading list with 50 books, and every single author was a male.
Yeah.
And to which I responded and said, hey, these were all male authors. Here are like the 10 books that my company read in our campus ambassador program, and they are all female authors. Thought you might want to like add some. And I always say, it doesn't bother me. If anything, it pushes me to go further, but it's going to bother some female. Yeah. And so I think it's just a matter of like, instead of just having the conversation, people just got to do something. And that's hard, which I get.
Well, I also think it goes back to earlier in people's lifetime. And I think this is a problem with males as well. I don't think we have enough men going into tech, believe it or not. Because I think people aren't getting encouraged at the age of, I think it's 8, 9, 10 years old is when you really have to capture people's imagination, whether they're men or women. And I think too many people don't have like, this passion for design or using technology to build things. It's just not being marketed at that age. It's not until you get into college, oftentimes, that people are being told to think about their careers and what they want to do. And I think definitely if you look through that lens, my suspicion, and Linda talked about this on the podcast, and I've heard this from other women as well, for whatever reason, and in her generation, my generation, the example is women just didn't get erector sets. That was a common present that boys would get, and then the girls would get a Barbie set. And when you're getting a Barbie set and then the guy is getting, here's an erector set, go build something, that just starts to set things in motion. I'm curious your perspective. Do you see more women in your generation being drawn to tech and entrepreneurship?
I think that I'm kind of on like the edge of right when I'm starting to see it. Like, think little examples. I speak at a lot of high schools and colleges, obviously about safety, but also about female entrepreneurship, and I love doing that, and I love speaking for truly anyone that'll listen. And I think that, I actually went back to my high school and spoke recently, and they have a women in STEM club. And to me, I was like, whoa. I mean, that would never have existed when I was in high school. And I spoke to them, and, I basically saw myself in all of them and said, my major was still really hard, and there were still only guys and whatever it might be. But I think it was something that just seeing that was super cool. But I think also, it's things like, I was in the chess club when I was in 5th grade, and I was probably the only girl. And it was really weird for me to be in there at that time. But now, it's 50-50 and things like that. So I think you're starting to see that sort of shift. And I think because of, companies like Google and Facebook and these like cool tech companies, you see more people becoming interested in it because it looks like something viable, and they are doing a really good job with incorporating females and things like that because they're so new. They don't have this blueprint from 20 years ago to go off of. They're just adapting. And so I think it's something that I'm definitely seeing a change. I didn't really see that when I was in college, which is unfortunate. But then I think, all of the entrepreneurship that I was involved in like the Adams Apprenticeship program, all this stuff, like totally saw it there. It totally made sense. But at the same time, it was funny because even we would be interviewing people for the next cohort, and, I would be like so biased towards the girl, but, there'd be the guy that just in his childhood started like 4 different companies, and the girl didn't. And I think that's just like you said, like what they were given when they were younger. And, I think that a lot of that has to do with, who you grow up around, what kind of school you go to, like your parents, all these different things. And I think that because, my dad like really wanted a son when I was born. I was the firstborn. And so he kind of raised me like one. And so, it was things like I'm super into sports, and I like love college football. But at the same time, it was things like, I of course thought I should start a soccer camp and things like this. I was like, no, girls are playing soccer. That's weird. We should just start one, and things like that. But I think that, stems from because I just thought that was the norm. That's what my dad was doing and things like that. And I think it's changing, but it should be changing faster. And I think that it's, you can publish these things, and, you can have amazing women leaders and all these quotes. And I think that the problem is there gets to be a conversation where some people think that, feminism means one thing or whatever. And then, you see it. I'm also a stand-up comedian. You see it there, and there's not a lot of female comedians.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Surprise. But it's something that you see it in every different sector. But I think with technology specifically it's just not really an encouraged thing until kind of now. Like I'm seeing it in my pre-K through 12 school there. I learned cursive and how to type, and they're learning coding. That's so
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. One of my favorite charity events I've been to is called Project Scientist. They did Connect for Charity, and we played a bunch of Connect 4 games, and all these companies got to sponsor Connect 4 games. But they also had a group of younger girls, all different age groups, come in and compete in building different projects, different tools in code or different applications in code. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the type of thing that can capture people's imagination at an early age and to drive that. So I'm curious, your perspective, what can old white guys like myself do to help attract more women into the field? Do we just get out of the way because we can't become women mentors? What do we do?
Yeah. I think that it's such an interesting question. And I think this is something that, I work on. My dad's a white guy too. And so I've worked with him on this and, what can he do and things like that. And, It comes down to a lot of women especially think that, okay, well, if I'm going to like break into the tech world, I'm going to do this or that. Like I'm giving up aesthetics and fun things and the color pink and, and it just seems like this bleak, dark world. And so I think it's something that making things not like, oh, I'm inviting women. It's just changing your stance and your being and just being an inviting person. It doesn't need to be like, okay, I am really gonna focus on females and make sure they feel welcome and safe and all this different stuff. But it's just welcoming everyone. And I think that that's a morals thing. And I think that, women are great at collaborating, men are great at competing. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that that is why there has been so many successful men in this world, because they will compete until they get to the top, and the top is like incredible. But I think that knowing that women work best together and in groups, and that's not something that should be shameful. That's actually something that's really, really cool and incredible. And I think that, for all males to kind of realize that working together can make females excel, rather than saying like, hey, you female and you male, like go against each other and whoever is the best, great. I think it's more of, hey, why don't you guys work together and create something that's amazing, and it's not riding on your job promotion. And I think that just having a welcoming and open environment for all types of people, whatever they identify as, is the most important. And that's something, I grew up in the South. There's, a lot of different things that go on here, and I don't swing one way or another, but I think it's something that everyone should just have the mindset of, how can I help this person succeed that would also make me succeed? Yeah. I think from a, mentor's perspective, I think that it should be, I really want this person to do well, but also I want to see it as a feedback train, because women also work really well when they can help other people. Yep. So that's what I would say. I don't know if that's perfect though.
No, I think that's good advice. And it probably doesn't just apply to women. I think that thinking more about collaboration and less about competition helps build better teams in general, no matter what the person is. But I think that points to why it's important to have women on the team, because there are just, my suspicion is there are certain evolutionary things that have built over tens of thousands of years that we're unaware of, that have made women better at collaborating. Because I've seen it firsthand on teams where
and I think that women also tap into empathy really well. And there's been so many studies done. I'm sure only females have seen them, but there's all these really cool studies that show, what happened when they added a female to the team and how it like made companies soar and all these other things. And I think that just, not just saying that's a cool article, but saying, cool, let's get a female in here or whatever it might be. There's so many, and I, speak from a very, very privileged, like white female. I think that is something to be said. Like, white females might be getting ahead a little bit now. And I think that it's something that it really frustrates me, because, I have friends that are from all different types of backgrounds, especially in this Vital Voices community, and seeing that they're still truly just undermined completely really frustrates me, because it's not just okay, we're going to let Bob's daughter in because I was in the same fraternity as him or whatever it is, it should be like, hey, this female that came from this completely different background from me and looks totally different from me is the person that will probably end up running this company in 10 years and making it way more valued. So I think it's looking at everyone.
I agree. So looking back now with the progress that you've made, what do you think surprised you most about the journey?
A lot of different things. It makes dating interesting. That was an interesting surprise.
And so much more about the security of it.
Yes, and I think that I love to make sure the app is working and things like that, or posting, and I think also having to learn. I think this is something as a female too, having to learn how to self-promote is very interesting, and I think that like I said, my generation's right on the cusp of like, that's kind of a crazy thing for a girl to be really like pumped up about what she's doing. And so that's been kind of funny. Also, it's always a funny joke on dating apps when someone has like entrepreneur or founder in their bio. And so that's been funny. But I think that probably the most surprising thing is how incredible this journey is. I mean, it is really stressful. And I think it was really hard when I was a full-time student, but I think also it's not like I had to give up my social life completely or anything like that. But I think that the most surprising thing would be how much I've grown as a person, and also to the point of how how much my eyes have been opened to all of the different people that are working their tails off and may not even make a cent. And that has been just like so inspiring to see. And also working with social impact driven companies has changed my perspective on so many different things. And I think that, you know, for me, I'm a very confident person, but I had no idea if I would be doing this longer than 6 months or whatever it was. And I think that seeing the support that goes into that, especially in the entrepreneurial community, has been really incredible. And just seeing how I can, have a company that can make me money, but also can help people has been really, really cool.
Yeah, that's definitely cool when you can align the two of those. So,
yeah.
What advice would you give yourself back, let's say 1 year before you finally started Grooop, knowing what you know now?
Ooh. I would give myself a lot of advice because that was my freshman year of college. So, but
I would have needed a lot of advice my freshman year of college.
Yeah.
I wasn't starting companies just for the
yeah, no, people always, I didn't drink my freshman year of college, and people always ask like, oh, is that why you stayed? And I'm like, no. I was like, I wish that inspired the company, but no. Yeah. And I think that my main advice would be, the girl that works with me, Corey Patrick, she is our head of marketing, my right-hand woman, literally, I mean, keeps me alive, honestly. I mean, truly, whether it's making me laugh or just helping with social media, whatever it is. And I would have said, first of all, to bring her on way sooner. But also,
I don't know her, but great advice.
Yeah, way sooner. Yeah. And then I think also just not ever second guessing. I think it would have made things go a little faster, and whether that's second guessing within the company or, for example, like I was really worried that taking time off to go climb Kilimanjaro, for example, was going to like tank the company or anything like that. And that experience was one of the best experiences of my entire life. And the fact that I stressed over going and doing that at all frustrates me. So I think that, just saying to just go with your gut, because I think that women especially are really good at having an intuition about things. And so just going with my gut and probably just starting it a little sooner, because I really wish I could have prevented a friend getting sexually assaulted or whatever that is. But I'm glad that I can now help prevent that in the future, and, have that same friend help me and advise me. But yeah, I would say just trusting my gut, because I do it pretty well, but I sometimes hesitate. And I think that just not hesitate. I mean, thinking before you act, of course, but not hesitating.
I think that's great advice. I think it is, to be fair to you, it's a lot harder for a 20-year-old to trust their gut than it is a 30 or a 40-year-old. And most founders are, contrary to conventional wisdom, more in their 30s to 40s, because they've just got so many experiences that their gut can draw on. So, but I think that is still good advice. Like if you think something and if it follows you from high school into college, you probably should act on it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's great. So I'd like to geek out a bit on the technology, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And I caveat this with, I realize that it's Smashing Boxes built some of this, so I won't get too deeply into it, but if you can just speak on it. So how does your app work in terms of knowing where you are? You talk a lot about privacy, and you kind of prevent people from knowing too much. So obviously that's a big role for the app to play, but how does the app work in terms of the technology that enables that separation of privacy?
Yeah. So the way that we have it work is with safe zones, we use geofencing. So that way that people, can either use their current location or they can use an exact address, and it'll just geofence a pretty small radius. So for example, if you're at a house, the next door house is not going to be geofenced. So that way
Just for the listeners who might not be as technical, Geofence is a pretty simple but powerful concept where an iOS developer can draw a circle around a point and say, if a user crosses into this, fire off an event, and then the app developer can catch that event and then do something in response, right? Am I summarizing it roughly?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that the way I've dumbed it down to friends is, and you can actually kind of see the technology explained almost when you're setting a safe zone, because when you press current location, it builds a little circle in exactly what would be the safe zone. So that can kind of help explain it, I guess. But so that's literally the only location that we do, obviously, except for when someone sets off an alert, and that'll just ping in just for that alert. So it's not tracking it all the time. It's not draining your data or draining your battery, which was something that one of my best friends actually wrote as one of her recommendations. She said, my phone dies all the time, and I also run out of data literally all the time, and I can't have that be happening. And so that was something we really focused on. So we've tested it so that you can use such a small amount of data. And this is like what I geek out on, I guess, but there's such a small amount of data that we were able to set off an alert at a Beyonce concert, which literally shut down the Triangle area and had traffic backed up, I'm pretty sure, 60 miles. I mean, it was the most absurd. I mean, people didn't get to the concert because it was that crazy, that many people. And it was our stadium tour. So there was a lot of people. You could not send a text. You could barely get a phone call through. And we were able to still use the app. And so we really focused on being able to use it. So if someone's, on the New York subway, or they're at a sporting event, or they're at a concert, or things like places where you would really want to feel safe, it uses that little bit amount of data. But yeah, so essentially with the developers, like probably the coolest geeky parts are the geofencing, the tiny amount of data that we use. And then the push notifications are kind of what keep people engaged with it and keep the app sort of running without just running constantly in the background.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I've done some geo-based applications, and they can, not only do they burn your battery quickly and your data, but they burn you. Like the phone gets really hot because the processor gets really hot when it's doing that. And so I think that's really smart that you use the geofences. But I think it's even more smart because it's really hard to change customer behavior, and letting the app automatically update your status removes a lot of friction. How did you know you wanted the app to work this way? Because it's a really smart design decision to do that. A lot of first-time app builders will think more about make the user do things, but the best apps always figure out, how do I reduce the friction? How do I make it automatic? How do I make it that I don't want you to have to text me every time you get home, but it should just automatically text me? Was that a conscious decision that you made, or did you just luck into that?
Yeah, it was very conscious. So a guy that was on the project originally is one of my good friends, Edward. He introduced me to the term sticky, which a lot of business professionals use about, having an idea and having a company or a brand that sticks and not just a really cool idea. And so he and I kind of talked about it in the beginning of, okay, like what's going to be sticky? Like what is our generation? Obviously our generation is known for being on our phones. I mean, in a negative connotation and all this stuff. And so, but what we also realized, and what probably a lot of people not in our generation wouldn't realize automatically, is that we are all on our phones a lot, but we're also actively trying to not be on our phones. I mean, you see all the time millennials or Gen Zs doing these like social media detoxes, or giving social media up for Lent, or, taking time away from their phone, or doing hikes for a weekend, things like this, where they're just trying to detach from their phones because they're on them so often. So we wanted a concept that allowed people to depend on technology for safety, but didn't feel like they were on their phone the whole time. So this kind of gave it the best of both worlds, that their technology was keeping them safe, but they weren't on their phone because it does it automatically. So, yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. So have you heard of the book or read the book Hooked by Nuri Yal?
I actually have not.
Okay. Well, he kind of wrote the playbook for how to make addictive apps. And it's part of the reason that people have to do detoxes and but it turns out there's a real science to building apps that people get addicted to, for all the good and bad that comes with that. One of the concepts in this book is that successful apps need ways to trigger usage of the apps. One of the beautiful things about your geofencing safe space approach is that not only does it automatically happen, but it triggers usage of the app. I can get ostensibly a push notification saying Nina just walked into a safe space, or Nina just left and is on the way or is ready to go. External triggers that fire off at random intervals turn out to be one of the most powerful aspects of addictive apps. And this, Nuri Yal in this book points out this is why social media platforms work as well as they do, because there's all sorts of triggers that are just happening, whether you want to initiate it or not, that just remind you to get on your app. And that's the ideal world. You want users generating triggers. And so again, it sounds like you haven't read the book. Was this a concept that you guys understood and appreciated when you were designing the app, or is it just a nice, maybe bad side effect? I don't know.
Yeah. We wanted something that kept people engaged. So, I mean, we have things also, that were super conscious, like on Fridays and Saturdays, it'll say, I'm pretty sure it's at 6 p.m. It'll say out and about, make sure to update your safety status or whatever. There's like 5 different messages that we have that'll just send out to people that have the app downloaded. So we definitely have always thought about, just making sure people stay engaged and things like that. And I think that, we don't want there to be any barrier. So for example, if someone creates a group and they don't have any contacts that has the app, but they add people from their contacts, it'll send a text to those people and say, hey, join my group, things like that. We were just like setting, not traps, that's a horrible way to put it, but like setting little traps to, keep people engaged, because, our primary goal is to make people feel safe while also doing things that they like to do. So it's something that we also focus on our social media, making sure that people are checking in. And obviously during quarantine, originally we were like, oh my gosh, we should take down the push notifications on Fridays and Saturdays. It's so insensitive. I mean, no one's out and about. But now it's become something of, we can kind of draw on that and make it funny and stuff like, because it's one of those things where you can look forward to going out and about again, but also it's something that our company is meant to be fun and funny and lighthearted, and not something that you're associating with, curing world hunger, but also it's something that's doing a great thing, but also part of normal life. It's part of, you don't have to be curing cancer, curing world hunger, curing COVID. Yeah. Like, you don't have to be doing one of those things to also be safe. You can just be a regular person. And so that was something, I mean, especially I was like, I am a very regular person when I created it. So that's something that we've really focused on, just to make sure people are engaged, but also engaged in a way that's fun.
Well, you may not have read Hooked, but I think you understand a lot of the premises there. So that's great. For me, it was really eye-opening reading the book, because I don't think about the behavioral economics behind it, and I don't naturally think that way. But there is definitely a formula, and that external trigger, getting you to just engage with an app, but then it adds value, I think is a very, very useful way to get people to use the app. And in your case, it isn't just people going on Instagram to get more likes. It's actually improving the security of people around them. So that's obviously awesome. Can you speak a little bit to privacy and how you and the team think about balancing privacy and security? I think you hit on it earlier, but I'd like to just explore that for a couple of minutes if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, I mean, there's, oh my gosh, so many privacy laws, and they've expanded since our fruition. So that's something that we focus on all the time. And I actually was studying abroad in London when the whole like GDP, all that stuff started coming out in the UK. And also a reason we started focusing on study abroad students while I was studying there. But we realized, there is no need to know that John Smith from Cary, North Carolina, that's 18 years old, set off an alert. We just want to see, hey, there was an alert set off at 6 a.m. So we really focused on, okay, what is the minimal amount of data that we can track and also have this be useful to universities, employers, whatever. And so we literally, the only things that we'll ever collect are when and where alerts are being set off, and like maybe the demographic of the user, if that's provided. And we would never, keep an email or keep a phone number or anything like that. When it's verified, because when you go in the app, you have to verify your phone number, you log in with Facebook, Google, Apple, whatever. But we verify the phone number for your security purposes, not so we can save it. So we really focus on the user, and, no one can just jump in your group. They have to be invited, and you have to accept that. And if someone requests your location within the app, which can be done and shared for 10 minutes, then that request has to be accepted. It's not just automatic. And I think that that's something that we've really focused on, and we, kind of have that upper hand against other safety apps, because, it is something you can use with not just your best friends. You can use it with people that may be new acquaintances, because, you can feel safe with them. But also just from like a back end perspective, we're not going to save that stuff. We don't have a use for it. We're not planning on selling your data. And, we just want to improve safety. That's our goal. That's where we stand. Only time we're going to take your email is if you sign up for the newsletter. So that's kind of where we stand with it.
Very cool. We've seen a temporary shift in attitudes towards privacy as a result of the COVID pandemic, certainly. Mm-hmm. As someone in this world of privacy, do you think this will lead to longer term changes in what consumers are willing to trade off in terms of privacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it just in the past couple of years with everything that happened with like Facebook and all this other stuff. And I think that, just being transparent is the most important thing for so many companies. And I think that especially during this whole crisis right now, the most successful business plan right now is being transparent. And if that's saying, hey, like we need your help to keep the company alive or whatever it might be for a specific company, that's what you should do. But I think that, in terms of privacy, this woman that I actually interviewed the other day for a feature series we're doing right now said, we're asking them what safety means to them. And something that she had pointed out is, as women, we always think about like negotiating our space. We always think about like, is that person too close to us? Or why is that person near us? What time of night, all those kinds of things.
And now it's say person, but it's guy. You could say guy. We're creepy.
Not necessarily. In New York, you would be amazed. but because it might be just the store. But now in COVID-19 times, you're seeing, and this is totally quoting her, I won't take credit for this amazing idea, but in COVID-19 times now, like men are also having to say, ooh, why is that person near me? Like, don't get within 6 feet, and having to negotiate space. And so I think that the fact that whole idea is globalized and in everyone's head is, I think something, and I had not even thought about that until she said it. And so her name is Vix Raytano. I'll give her credit, but it's something that I think that will be advantageous, because I think men who we have surveyed have always said, like, I want to help women feel safer. And I mean, alarmingly high statistics of that, obviously. And, in places where
that's natural, right? I've got nieces that I love more than anything. We all have sisters, mothers, it probably, it seems counterintuitive, but it's also pretty obvious, because there are, women in all men's lives, and they do ultimately want that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like guys have always wanted that. And I think that, now it's also keeping themselves safe, and whether that's a health standpoint or a physical standpoint. And so I think it's just going to be an interesting sort of shift in sort of the global mindset. But I think we've just seen a change in the past couple of years. So I think it's just up to companies to be straightforward. And I mean, I know that a lot of times people will say, well, of course I didn't read the 45-page privacy policy. And I'll admit, I don't usually read those, but I think also, there's a difference between like a company that's taking your DNA and, us just trying to improve safety. So I think it just sort of depends, but transparency is always the best policy.
Yeah, I agree with privacy. It always is. And I think even with security breaches, it's the biggest problem with data breaches, in my opinion, is that the companies aren't transparent because they get slapped so hard on the wrist. And you understand why the regulators want to slap people on the wrist, but then it encourages not disclosing. And the nature of security, and I would argue the nature of privacy, is that you have to have collaboration across everybody in this privacy chain. And when there are violations of privacy, it can't be you're going to be canceled because you screwed up as a company. It's more, no, disclose when you make a mistake so everybody can learn from your mistake.
Yep.
How do we move forward?
Absolutely.
So you hit on this a little bit. I'm curious how involved you are in startup community activities. You talked about a lot of different groups that I'm going to link to in the show notes that are women-specific groups, but are you involved in the broader kind of startup community? And this question, I'm curious, you're based out of New York, you happen to be in Raleigh right now, and you started in Chapel Hill. So I don't know which startup community you're most familiar with, but.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I got to say, when I got to New York, I mean, I literally was like Googling pitch competitions. Cause to me, I was like, I'm pitching to a whole new audience. And it is like I just started because I just moved to a whole new city. And so there were things along the way, when I was living in London, I was part of Google Campus, which was super cool. And I literally thought it was a coffee shop. That's why I walked in. That's why I became a part of it. So,
I believe it's literally in London.
Yeah. I love it. But in New York, there's things like Founders Live and, all of these things that have actually done a really good job of transitioning to virtual. And so I think that we're, especially right now, seeing that all these startup communities can be global and, national, whatever it is, because they can now be virtual. But I would say I'm easing into the New York startup market just because I feel like I just got there. But
it's
then
enormous. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
Like you're from Chapel Hill / Raleigh. I'm from the Charlotte market. It's hard to even compare what's going on in North Carolina.
Oh yeah.
To what's happening in New York. It's I mean, in our smaller markets, that's one of the big benefits I think that we have is it's less than 6 degrees of separation. It's 3 degrees to get to anybody in any of these markets. In New York, that just doesn't exist because it's enormous.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say that, a lot of my connections have been, this person either now lives in Chapel Hill, but they lived in New York and they have all these connections or whatever it might be. And that kind of like helps the startup world. But I think that the cool thing with startups is a lot of startups and a lot of startup founders have either already had like 4 companies because they're serial entrepreneurs and they have 1,000,001 connections or whatever it is. And that's been really helpful. But I think that also because I am really focused on Southeastern schools, and that was our original focus, I'm much more plugged into kind of the Southeastern and Raleigh, North Carolina startup community. But I'm definitely trying to tap in. I think I'm much more involved in the female New York startup community, but I think with things like Founders Live and some other programs, I mean, I just kind of went to random events for a couple of months just to network with people. But I would say that, I mean, there's things, on Meetup and things like that I've gone to, but I'm not fully plugged in, but I don't really know what would signify fully plugged in anyway.
No, it's hard because when you're at the stage that you are, you have to spend more time on your own company than
exactly.
And there's a balancing act. So you mentioned Founders Live, and I'll look them up and link to them in the show notes. Are there any events, either in person or virtually, that you recommend beyond the ones that you've already talked about? In Charlotte, for instance, we have a great one called Pitch Breakfast that everybody goes to. It's a pitch competition that happens the second Wednesday of every month in 2 different locations. And it's a great one. Are there any of those in New York or in Chapel Hill or virtually that you?
Yeah. I mean, so in Chapel Hill at UNC, they do the Carolina Challenge, which is honestly a really incredible thing. And I did it for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. And
What's that called again? I'll link out to that.
The Carolina Challenge, and it's through the Entrepreneurship Center at UNC, and they do stuff that's really great, and so does Launch Chapel Hill. So I would say both of those would probably be my recommendations. North Carolina was, I just wasn't really as plugged in Raleigh because I was living in Chapel Hill.
Sure.
But I will say in New York, yeah, Founders Live is like one that I've heard of, and it's very relaxed, which is nice. But in terms of like workshops, things that have been really, really, really helpful, Girl Boss is actually their conference, which was, and I know I talked about it earlier, is completely virtual this year, and it's global. And I don't really know what that'll be like, but they do incredible stuff. And so I think that that's one that's just always a great one to note down. And then I think also Female Founder does a million and one things, and you have to apply to be in the Female Founder Collective, but it's so worth it. And they do like an annual workshop that's in New York, and then they've been doing virtual stuff for us recently. And I know I talked about that earlier, but yeah, those would probably be my recommendations. There's not really anything that I'm super plugged into workshop wise, besides those, but yeah, Launch Chapel Hill is always doing really cool stuff. They do like cohorts and things like that, and they're so nice too.
For what it's worth, you've given me like 5 times as many things as the next most that anybody has given. So.
Oh, good. I like to help people out, even if I wasn't like super involved. If they were really nice to me and encouraging of my brand, that goes a long way for me. So
I agree. Well, look, Nina, this has been great. I'm really excited for you and your progress, and I'm going to have you on after you finally go back to that round of funding and get that wrapped up. Thank you for sharing your story with the listeners so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Cheers. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks.